The words hung in the air, heavy and sour, like the stale smell of cheap perfume clinging to a used dress. It's just a preventative measure, dear. For own good. We can't have you making any rash decisions. He said it with that infuriatingly patronizing smile, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes, making him look benevolent while the words themselves were a barbed hook. My own father. My own heart. My normal was a carefully constructed facade. On the surface, holidays were cheerful, family dinners were boisterous, and he was the doting father, the pillar of the community. Beneath, it was a constant negotiation, a silent calculation of how much of myself I could give without being entirely depleted. My mother had passed years ago, leaving behind a void and a considerable estate. Dad, ever the pragmatist, had stepped into her role as executor, and as the years went by, his management of her legacy, which was also meant to be mine, became increasingly possessive. I'd learned to nod, to smile, to accept his pronouncements as gospel, even when they tasted like ash in my mouth. My friends saw him as a jolly widower, my sister, bless her heart, saw him as a victim of grief. Only I saw the subtle shifts, the way his gaze lingered a fraction too long on the stock portfolio statements, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw when I mentioned wanting to invest in my own small business. There were moments, small pinpricks of light that illuminated the darkness. I remember when I was 22, fresh out of university, brimming with ideas for a sustainable fashion line. I'd painstakingly drafted a business plan, secured tentative supplier agreements, and approached him, trembling with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He'd listened, or at least, he'd let me talk. Then, he'd pulled out a pristine ledger, the kind used for formal accounts, and opened it. Ah, yes, he'd said, his finger tracing an imaginary line. Your mother's portfolio. She always had a keen eye for investments. Now, this particular fund, it's performing exceptionally well. Much better than any fledgling business venture, I assure you. We'll keep this for you, a nest egg. No need to risk it on experimental endeavors. He'd patted my hand, a dismissive, final gesture, and the ledger had closed with a soft, definitive thud, sealing away my dreams. Another time, a few years later, I'd been saving up for a down payment on a small apartment. It wasn't lavish, just a modest one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, a space that would be truly mine. I'd been diligently putting aside every spare penny, supplemented by a modest inheritance from my mother that he managed. He discovered my savings account statement while organizing my paperwork. Instead of praise, he'd launched into a lecture about financial prudence. Darling, he'd sighed, holding the statement like it was a contaminated object, this money is for your security. A down payment? So premature. You haven't even settled on a career path, let alone a partner. What if you need to travel? What if you decide to pursue higher education abroad? This needs to be invested, grow. I'll handle it. It's for the best. He then proceeded to transfer the funds into one of his safer, high-yield accounts, with no consultation, no discussion, just a fait accompli. I'd felt a cold knot of resentment tighten in my stomach, a feeling I'd learned to swallow, to compartmentalize. The true turning point, the gut-wrenching betrayal, happened on a crisp autumn afternoon. I'd been experiencing concerning heart palpitations for weeks, a persistent tightness in my chest that scared me. I'd finally booked an appointment with a cardiologist, a specialist my mother had seen before. I'd scheduled it during my lunch break, hoping to keep it discreet. I'd told my father I had a doctor's appointment, a vague fib I'd perfected over the years to avoid his interrogations. He'd offered to drive me, which I'd politely declined, wanting the autonomy of going alone. As I was about to leave the office, my phone rang. It was him. His voice, usually smooth and reassuring, had a strange edge. Oh, darling, I was just coming to pick you up. I had a sudden thought. I know a wonderful cardiologist, a personal friend. He's truly top-notch. Much better than some general practitioner. Let me just call him, get you an appointment right now. Before I could protest, before I could explain that I already had one, he continued, his tone becoming almost effusive. No, don't worry about your current appointment. This is much more comprehensive. He specializes in preventative care. He'll be able to assess everything, ensure you're in perfect health, no surprises down the line. I've already spoken to his secretary. She's fitting you in this afternoon. Just head over to his clinic. He rattled off an address, a different part of town altogether. I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, my heart hammering against my ribs with a terrifyingly amplified rhythm. But I already have an appointment, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. With Dr. Evans. A cardiologist. A dismissive huff. Oh, Dr. Evans? Nice man, I'm sure. But my friend, Dr. Alistair Finch, he's in a league of his own. He'll have you in and out, with a full report. And I've already taken care of the payment. Don't you worry about a thing. It's all sorted. He didn't wait for a response. Just go to Dr. Finch's. It's for the best. Love you. And the line went dead. I looked at my phone, then at my briefcase, then out the window at the bustling street. The air felt suddenly thin. The palpitations intensified. It wasn't just about the cardiology appointment anymore. It was the blatant override, the absolute certainty that his judgment superseded mine, even when it came to my own health. He hadn't asked. He hadn't inquired. He had simply decided, and then informed me. The "for your own good" was a veil, a thin veneer over a desire for control, for ownership. He had, in essence, denied me access to my own medical care, rerouting it through his own preferred channels, ensuring he was the gatekeeper. The smugness in his voice, the effortless assertion of authority, was a punch to the gut. He genuinely believed he was acting in my best interest, and that was the most chilling part. I didn't go to Dr. Finch. I didn't call him. I sat at my desk, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and I began to type. My fingers moved with a deliberate, cold precision. I opened the digital vault, the secure portal to the trust that my mother had established for me. It was meticulously structured, designed to provide financial independence upon my 25th birthday, which had passed almost a year ago. My father, as the initial trustee, had been meticulously managing it, providing me with statements that always seemed to highlight his own prudent financial stewardship. But my mother, ever the astute woman, had included a clause. A rather specific clause that allowed for the appointment of a successor trustee, under certain conditions. Conditions I had, for years, dismissed as overly cautious, almost paranoid. I accessed the relevant legal documents, downloaded the required forms. I meticulously filled them out, referencing the exact wording of my mother's trust agreement. No emotion colored my actions, just the stark reality of the legal framework. I documented the repeated instances of his financial interference, his unilateral decisions regarding my funds, his dismissal of my own financial autonomy. I presented it as a pattern of behavior that demonstrated his inability or unwillingness to act solely in my best interest, as per the trust stipulations. I didn't write angry screeds or emotional appeals. I wrote a factual, chronological account, supported by dates and specific financial transactions that I'd painstakingly catalogued over the years. The crucial element was the succession of trusteeship. My father had assumed he would be the trustee indefinitely, a paternal oversight that benefited him immensely. But the trust allowed for my designation as successor trustee, with the power to appoint a new, independent trustee if the current one was deemed to be acting against the spirit of the trust. I didn't want to manage the entire trust myself, that was a burden I wasn't ready for. Instead, I named a highly reputable financial institution, one known for its impartiality and fiduciary responsibility, as the successor trustee. I attached the necessary legal paperwork, the signed affidavit, the formal letter of resignation for my father, and the appointment of the new trustee. I printed everything, a thick stack of papers. I didn't mail it. I didn't email it. The next morning, I drove to the law firm that had drafted my mother's will and the trust agreement. I walked into the reception area, calm and collected. I handed the entire package to the paralegal, a stern woman with sharp eyes, and stated, "This is the formal notification of the appointment of a successor trustee for the trust, as per Section 7.4 of the Trust Agreement. Please ensure this is processed immediately. I watched her eyes widen slightly as she took in the thickness of the folder. She looked from the folder to me, then back again. I offered a small, polite smile. Thank you. The silence that followed was deafening. Not the outward silence of an empty room, but the internal quiet that descends when a storm has passed, leaving an eerie calm. I had done it. I had executed the quietest, most precise form of revenge imaginable. The fallout was immediate and predictable. My father's frantic calls began within hours. His initial texts were confused, then insistent, then laced with a thinly veiled panic. What is this about a new trustee? This is nonsense. I'm your father. Then came the accusations. You've been manipulated. Someone has filled your head with lies. His tone shifted from patronizing concern to outright fur. Why? He immediately contacted my sister, my designated flying monkey. She called me, her voice trembling with distress. Honey, what have you done? Dad is beside himself. He says you're trying to cut him off. He just wants to protect you. I listened patiently, offering calm, measured responses. I'm not cutting anyone off, Sarah. I'm ensuring the trust is managed according to Mom's wishes, by professionals. He tried to leverage guilt, the age-old tactic. After all I've done for you? After raising you? Deny me this small oversight? It's ungrateful. He even attempted to appeal to my emotions, fabricating elaborate scenarios of his financial ruin if he lost access to the trust's income. It was all performance, a desperate attempt to regain control. The social consequences were the most satisfying. Word spread like wildfire through our circle. The narrative he tried to spin, that I was ungrateful, emotionally unstable, easily influenced, began to crumble under the weight of his own actions. People who had always seen him as a benevolent figure started to question his motives. Whispers followed him at the country club. His friends, who had benefited from his largesse, suddenly became scarce. The esteemed man of integrity was revealed to be a controlling individual who had exploited his parental position and his wife's legacy. He discovered the finality of my actions when the new trustee sent him a formal notice of his removal, outlining the terms of his severance. There was no room for negotiation, no way to appeal. The institution's lawyers were formidable, their processes unyielding. He tried to fight it, of course, but the trust documents, the evidence of his overreach, were irrefutable. His smug certainty evaporated, replaced by a look of raw disbelief, then impotent rage. I saw him once, at a local grocery store, a few weeks later. He was standing in the produce aisle, looking utterly lost, his shoulders slumped, the usual arrogance completely absent. He glanced in my direction, his eyes wide with a desperate plea, but I simply turned my shopping cart and moved to another aisle. The closure wasn't a cathartic release of anger, but a deep, quiet settling. It was the knowledge that justice, in its own slow, methodical way, had been served. The power had been shifted, not through confrontation or drama, but through the cold, impartial application of rules. My father, the man who had always dictated my life, had finally been silenced, not by my voice, but by the echo of my mother's foresight and my own quiet resolve. The satisfaction wasn't in his ruin, but in the absolute correction of a profound injustice, a rebalancing of the scales. And in that quiet, I found a peace I hadn't realized was possible.